Well, hello and welcome back to the Lamppost Listener. My name is Daniel.
I'm Phil.
And this is a podcast where we chronicle transcendent truth by traveling further up and further into the classic works of children's literature.
This is Season 9, Episode 12, The Invasion, which covers chapters 25 through 27 of The Princess and the Goblin.
Can only mean one thing.
Invasion.
The great C.O. Bibble from the Phantom Menace.
Yeah, Star Wars Episode 1. It could mean a lot of things.
Communications disruption could mean many, many different things, Mr. Bibble over there. I think it's still spelled the same way as Bible, just pronounced Bibble. But
you would know. You had the
I know.
The DK Publishers visual Star Wars dictionary.
Phil, today we've got 3 really great chapters. You know, a couple of episodes ago I talked about how I felt as though maybe the pinnacle, the climax of the book was Curdy being found through Irene's string. I was just definitely wrong. Yeah, not at all. Getting back to reading this, like, oh no, the climax of the story.
So much more in this.
I had forgotten a lot of this stuff. I honestly had. The climax of this story is very much the Goblin invasion and the kidnapping of Irene, for sure. So we've got chapters 25, 26, and 27. Chapter 25 is Curdy Comes to Grief. Then the Goblin Miners, and then the Goblins in the King's House. And these have been 3 of my favorite chapters. So action-packed, so exciting. Were you feeling it today?
For context, I was rereading these chapters on a plane, and I was surprised at how action-packed they were.
Yeah.
And I was very grateful because it was very easy to read in preparation for this.
I feel like, too, the pacing of these 3 chapters is probably what's felt the least Victorian and the most modern.
Yeah. As
a reader. It felt like you're reading. This was so interesting. I'm right now reading a collection of essays that Anna, actually, you know what? I think it was Anna that got it for me. Or maybe she told someone to buy it for me. But it's a book called Informing the Inklings. It's George MacDonald and the Victorian Roots of Modern Fantasy. And it's a collection of essays and speeches.
Is it by several people?
Yeah, it's edited by Michael Partridge and Kristen Jeffrey Johnson. And I believe Dr. Johnson was on the Pints with Jack. I think she was on Pints with Jack for an episode a few seasons ago, because I've heard her on a podcast before. I assume it was with David and Matt and Andrew, but I might be wrong. And so this is a collection of essays talking especially about MacDonald's influence, obviously, on the Inklings and on a lot of just modern fantasy. I'm on an essay right now that's really interesting. We will talk more about it.
Is it on page 2?
No. This is the table of contents. I was just looking it up. I did not. You're like, I started it last night.
It's like everyone who reads Atomic Habits.
Oh, yeah.
I've been reading this book. Call me when you get past page 4.
Yeah. No. There's one called Organized Innocence, MacDonald Lewis and Literature for the Childlike, which we will definitely unpack when we're going to do an essay, not an essay, we're going to do an episode on The Fantastic Imagination, which is this essay that MacDonald wrote. Think very much in a similar vein as on 3 Ways of Writing for Children.
Ooh, okay.
Or on fairy stories. So very much I've been skimming it. I have not read the full thing, and because we'll cover it later this season. But in skimming, I'm like, oh, this is very much what Tolkien and Lewis are pulling from in many ways. But all that's to say, as I read through just a couple of different essays, you get a better sense of how exactly modern fantasy is indebted to MacDonald, because reading a lot of these first few chapters, you can see kind of some of the connections, but I've honestly been surprised at how different it still feels compared to, I've been reading through the Wheel of Time for the last few years, right? It feels very different than that. It feels different than, all the, even just reading Lord of the Rings, there's some significant, I think gaps in where I have a hard time saying, oh wait, how does this exactly influence the other thing? Well, these 3 chapters felt the most modern. You're like, this just like feels like I am reading Narnia or Tolkien or, something Brandon Sanderson or something modern like that. So You want to dive into it?
Yeah, let's go. I'm curious what it feels like to be on the edge like that. And was his work rejected? Did people just not care? Are we in the middle of something right now? Is someone doing some different kind of writing that is going to influence the next 100 years? Or was this a one-time thing where we were figuring out storytelling and now we're kind of locked in?
What do you mean figuring out storytelling?
I think that
We figured it out in the 20th century. They didn't know how to do it
well, I
yet.
feel like the printing press was a big change in
Okay.
how we went from oral storytelling to now things are printed out.
Yeah.
And you can refine and edit things, and stuff can last for a long time. We can look at an edition of something from 200 years ago and know exactly how it was told, instead of it changing a little bit as it's passed through each generation. And I think that the work is going to evolve in that way. I'm not saying that work's going to start changing, but I'm wondering if some of the big jumps in how we define certain genres have already been set in stone or ossified a little bit.
Yeah, in a way in which what I hear you saying is in a way in which it feels not that what you're not here. Let me say this: you're not saying that we're just better storytellers now because we're just consistently getting better as humans in some kind of like humanistic kind of view of the world, but instead that because of our own, like you and I, most of the stories we encounter, even someone like me who's in classical education, the vast majority of the stories I still encounter are modern stories or a modern retelling of an old story.
Right.
And that now we're getting to a place where it feels much more like in our own language.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I also think that we were figuring out how to make films, but now it's a little more solidified, and we don't do it the way we did in the 1950s. But it hasn't changed that much. It doesn't feel like it's changed that much in the past 20 years. Mm-hmm. The special effects have become different, but we're already repeating stuff. We're already remaking stuff that we made before, and we're making references to previous things. And it feels like maybe the jumps are getting smaller, whereas technology-wise, it feels like we're getting more exponential.
Well, this is interesting.
We're not getting more exponential. We are exponential still in technology, but storytelling doesn't seem to have that same type of explosion.
Yeah, I mean, you go back and read Homer, and many of the same story beats you find in the Odyssey are things that is how we would tell a story today.
Right.
Right.
And so I wonder if, as we talked about before, as we're kind of getting closer to that true beauty or the ideal way of doing something,
like in a Platonic version of like the forms that we talked about.
Are we getting closer to that pure form?
Oh, that's interesting.
Or is it like there's someone in I think in the late 1890s who said everything that will be invented has been invented. There's no more innovation that's coming.
That seems like a bad thing to say.
It's not a wise thing to say, but this is as everything that happened in the 1900s, just the explosion of inventions was about to happen. So I think I could see there's some things like we have virtual reality, which we've had 4 or 5 attempts. You just don't remember them because they weren't very good.
And because I hate it all. So.
And I think people are actually kind of tired of some of the stuff that is being pushed.
You're wearing your Meta Ray-Bans right now. We should have said.
Right. We're recording this whole thing with our special contact lenses that are embedded into our brains.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's leave that horror and go to something that I think is a little bit less horrific than
just
the digital
goblins.
world taking over all of us, which is a goblin invasion into the castle.
And a capture of a young princess.
Yes. All right. Here is the summary for chapters 25 through 27. When the goblin's digging appears to slow down, Curdy fears that they are about to invade the king's castle. Worried for Irene's safety, he begins regularly hopping the wall in order to keep an eye on things. On one of these stealthy excursions, Curdy is caught by the guards and takes a crossbow bolt to his knee. The guards refuse to believe his story and throw him into a makeshift prison cell. On the very same night, the goblins break into the castle. Curdy is visited by a lady with white hair who heals him in what appears to be a dream. When he awakes, he grabs his shoes and begins attacking the goblins. In the midst of the fighting, he's able to injure the queen and force all of the goblins back. It is only once the goblins escape that everyone realizes that they have taken Irene too.
That about sums it up.
Yeah.
Very action-packed.
So much happening. I mean, it's just straight battle.
You didn't even have to mention anybody having breakfast or going to sleep.
Which we've had a lot of. Well, let's dive into chapter 25 here. Curdy comes to grief. And the first thing I want to ask you, we're a little out of order here because this happens near the end of it. Does Curdy get shot in the leg, or does it just like kind of graze his skin? It is unclear to me.
It is unclear. I was picturing that the bolt went through the muscle And that's why he was having so much trouble.
Well, he clearly is like in a loss of blood daze that occurs. We're told that he does lose a lot of blood. He sleeps. He's in and out of it. In fact, when he tells the story about the goblins, no one believes him, not because it's so crazy. They know there's goblins around. They thought he was a goblin, but because like, oh, he's clearly just lost his mind because he's lost so much blood. But it also seems like everyone's pretty nonchalant about like, we shot a kid through the leg.
Yeah, and we're going to leave him.
They're just going to leave him and hope that he's
makeshift
okay when
jail.
we come back.
So, yeah.
That's what made me think like maybe it just grazed him, but also he wouldn't have lost that much blood. I think it's in him. But McDonald doesn't.
Maybe it grazed a vein.
Yeah, McDonald doesn't mention like them pulling the bolt out or anything like that.
Or disinfecting it, or
Well, I don't know how much disinfecting you're doing.
Maybe rub dirt in it.
Spit on it and just rub it in. Well, let's go. All right, let's go back to the beginning of this chapter, and then we'll get to this. I was hoping maybe you would say, oh no, he clearly did this, and you just missed it, Daniel. But it seems like we're both a little.
Oh no, I've read it multiple times. I don't see that.
I read it again this morning, being like, I'm sure that I've missed it, and no, I don't think we technically really know. Well, the beginning of this chapter does start. We get those good ASMR sounds with the page turning right now. I got the real thing today, no Kindle. So it starts out with Irene enjoying a wonderful summer. Some months pass. Curdy also believes there is no immediate danger because a lot of the goblins have stopped digging further down. They're kind of on a level plane. And throughout all of this, Curdy is mostly upset that he has been unable to apologize to Irene. And there's a couple of sentences here that I feel like we should read. It might sound monotonous in a way for us to read these over and over again because it's the same theme we've kept not hinting at, but just explicitly talking about, this idea of what a prince and a princess really are. Mm-hmm. But the fact that McDonald keeps coming back to it means I think it's worth us reading again. And here's what he says here at the beginning, as Curdy believes that he needs to apologize. Here, I should like to remark, for the sake of princes and princesses in general, that it is a low and contemptible thing to refuse to confess a fault or even an error. If a true princess has done wrong, she is always uneasy until she has had an opportunity of throwing the wrongness away from her by saying, I did it, and I wish I had not, and I'm sorry for having done it. So you see, there is some ground for supposing that Curdy was not a minor only, but a prince as well. Many such instances have been known in the world's history.
I love that last part. He doesn't say what they are. He just refers to this general feeling that this has happened before.
Yeah.
And the paragraph before the one you just read starts with, all this time Curdy had to be sorry, without a chance of confessing, that he had behaved so unkindly to the princess. And then this next part really gets me. This perhaps made him more diligent in his endeavors to serve her. And the way that was described really reminded me of childhood, but I feel like this still happens, where you do something, you wish you hadn't done it, and you're so eager for that chance to make it right and confess and let the person know that you understand what you did was not great. I feel like this happens in an accelerated way in marriage, especially.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It's a little different post-COVID when everybody's in the same house.
Yeah.
But still, you just wish, I want to resolve this because this doesn't feel right.
So at length, which is what McDonald says here, there begins to be a change in the goblin excavations in that they start kind of leveling off and then they begin moving up. And this worries Curdy when this begins to occur. And so he decides, as we mentioned earlier, that it's time to actually go back into the garden. We talked about the fact that for some reason, no one has thought about, hey, there's a giant rock on the other side of the castle wall that you can, a teenager can climb over, and they haven't made that portion of the wall taller or something like that. And so Curdy just, for the next couple of nights, hops over the wall and hangs out in the garden. And he's not caught at first. He's quite diligent about not being caught. There's also a new moon out there. And so because of this, he's able to kind of put his ear to the ground, or to a rock, and listen beneath. And he hears nothing But what happens on one night?
Suddenly his leg really hurts.
Yeah.
Because they thought he was a goblin and they shot him.
He gets shot with a crossbow in his leg, maybe?
Yeah, possibly.
Possibly. And they thought that he was a goblin. And so we have some of the men at arms coming saying, okay, what's going on here? Oh, no, it's a boy. They thought he was one of those demons. And they believe that he must just be a thief. And in all of this, Curdy is not able to convince them, and it becomes much worse when, wouldn't you know it, as they're taking him into the house to kind of check on him and at least hope that he doesn't die, Ludi, of all people, comes in, and she is just about as
helpful as ever.
annoying as she could be here. Here's what Ludi has to say. I declare it's the same young rascal of a miner that was rude to me and the princess on the mountain. He actually wanted to kiss the princess. I took good care of that. The wretch. And he was prowling about, was he? Oh, just like his imprudence. The princess being fast asleep and Curdy in a faint, she could misrepresent at her pleasure.
When she says that she took care of that.
Oh,
it's so frustrating.
Ludi, I think, is the most detestable character, and that's including the Goblin King and Queen right here for me.
She really gets your goat.
She really bothers you in this way. So she comes in, she's like, yeah, he was, and there's like, it's so frustrating because if you remember that scene when Irene says, I want to give Curdy a kiss. Curdy is the one who kind of rejects and says, I don't think that's appropriate. You're a princess. I'm a minor. Mm-hmm. And Ludi takes it upon herself to make it seem as if it was Curdy's idea and that Curdy was the one kind of breaking this, kind of rule between the classes here.
Right.
And just turns Curdy into, of course he's probably some kind of thief. We know that he's not someone to be trusted.
He also gets a little taste of his own medicine where he's not believed.
So important.
And he, I think, learns from this experience what that feels like even more. So he's already sorry for how things were left with Irene. But now he's experiencing it for himself where he is urging people to listen to him and they won't do it.
Yeah, this is such an important moment for Curdy because, I guess it was 3 episodes ago where we get to the grandmother's room and Curdy just doesn't believe Irene and they have this big fight and this blow up and that's what he's been wanting to apologize for. And since he's been home with his mother, he's actually just decided I must have been wrong. Like he's already had. This is not like a big, like the light bulb goes off. He's like, oh, maybe Irene was telling the truth. He already believes that she was telling the truth. That great conversation he has with his mother convinces him of that. But it's now that he realizes, this must be how Irene really felt, to just not be believed when you know for a fact you're telling the truth and you're trying to help the other person, right? Irene brings Curdy up to her grandmother in order to help him, right? Almost as like a reward. Thank you so much. I want to show you the woman who actually saved you. Yeah. Curdy is in the castle because he's trying to save Irene, right. And it's completely taken the opposite way. Irene is accused of playing a joke on Curdy, and here Curdy is accused of being a thief in the castle.
Yeah, just the opposite of what he actually is. He's trying so desperately to help.
Yeah.
And they determine that he's raving mad, and he finally falls asleep, and it's an odd kind of sleep. It's a peaceful sleep. And the way the chapter ends is they intend to go get him in the morning.
Yes.
Which, that's an interesting word choice. It makes me wonder, is something going to happen?
Yeah.
As we move into this next
little bit piece. Of a cliffhanger there as we move into chapter 26, which is called The Goblin Miners. And here we take a break from the action in the castle. Oh, no, not actually at first. I forgot, because we actually spend a little bit more time in the castle where we hear from some of the housemaids who are together who hear some weird noises. Now, this was a little silly here because the cook and some of the housemaids are talking like there's been a bunch of weird noises. And like it's probably just rats, right? It's probably just rats.
The cook says it's not rats because her cat would have taken care of it.
Yes.
She named her cat Tom.
Yes, they got Tom and the housekeeper's cat, Bob. So Tom and Bob would have taken care of them. And it's the nurse, of all people, who says correctly, she's like, whoa. Look, unless these are the rats from The Princess Bride, this is not rats. Like, it's way too loud. Like, what rats make noise like this? She says, in fact, it's the same noise that I heard. No, she said that it's the same noise that we heard from the miners underneath the mountain, which really should.
That's all the clues you need.
That should be all the clues you need. Yeah, it seems like really loud noise we haven't heard before, and it sounds exactly like the goblins digging underneath the ground. Also, there's a boy who's here who says the goblins are digging underneath the ground. But that's not enough, because in this moment, a rolling rumble is heard beneath. It feels like a great earthquake. And we learn that this is actually the goblins breaking through the wine cellar. But the rest of the crowd here in the castle decides that, it must just be an earthquake. We get those about every 100 years. This must be the earthquake that has come again this century.
Right. What's a scullery made? The one that is talking about rats moving about in great companies.
I'm not sure.
Is it silverware? Are they in charge of the silverware?
I really do not know. If only we could. It's something like a kitchen, though. It's like, isn't it one of the things where like you'd have the kitchen at the back of the house and the maid? I think it's kind of like a kitchen maid. Maybe we'll look it up for next time. But I go, oh, you know what? Got it right here. A small kitchen or room at the back of a house used for washing dishes and other dirty household work. That's the scullery. So the scullery maid would be the maid working.
Person who
so kind of right. Yeah.
Yeah. I got the
There's
silverware part.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
missed the plates and the cups.
There you go.
And the goblets.
So the goblins do break through, but they don't actually enter in. They go all the way back. This is a very short chapter. They go all the way back to the king and the queen and like, hey, we got in. And then the king and the queen and Hairlip all begin working there. And there's a good paragraph or two about how the queen is dressed.
Yeah, this is a very interesting power play by the king. The king has threatened to tell everyone about her toes if she puts shoes back on.
It's very odd.
That's, everybody's doing their best, I guess. But he allows her to wear one shoe into battle because he wants her to be able to.
Well, that's the shoe that she never takes off. She had these stone shoes, right? The one gets taken off by Kurt. He sees the 6 toes. The other shoe does not get taken off. Presumably, she hasn't removed it. She just left it on.
She's just kind of hobbling
And it
around.
says that she's stumping along in one shoe of stone and one of skin. And the one thing that was unclear again to me, I guess I'm just confused a lot these days with this book, is it just mean she's barefoot? Because it keeps saying her skin shoe. I'm like, wait, is it another shoe
it's
made
an animal skin
out of animal skin? Yeah. Right? Okay, I did not believe that she was
She has
barefoot.
her foot covered up so that other people can't see her toes.
That makes sense.
But she's not allowed to commission another stone shoe
because it keeps the king up at night when she kicks him with it.
Yeah, and he doesn't allow her to in the way he enforces that it was by threatening
to tell everyone about. That's why I was like, she can't be barefoot because then wouldn't everyone just straight up see her toes?
Yeah.
But the fact that it's called a skin shoe was a little odd to me.
That is odd.
Maybe that's how they said barefoot in Victorian England. They're like, oh, I'm going to wear my skin shoes outside, and that just meant you were.
It was a different time, and we just don't know what it was like.
Yeah, they were just going barefoot back then. Yeah, so the king, as you said, threatens to, as MacDonald puts it, expose her deformity if she had made another one. Where they do go in, they quietly enter the castle, and that's where this very short chapter ends. And we get into our longer chapter here, chapter 27, the goblins in the king's house. And it begins with a dream.
Once he falls asleep, he starts dreaming right away, which is a sign that he hasn't slept very much.
Yes. And reading this for the first time, or the first time that we're doing this on the podcast, I'd forgotten about this, and I was very confused because it's one of those kind of storytelling kind of tropes where he wakes up from a dream, but really waking up in the dream it's still a dream.
Right.
And we find
this is 20 times. Just
I was like, we found out he does this 20 times.
That's so much.
He's waking up.
So we grew up in different states. I grew up in North Carolina. We had a writing we had a writing thing that was.
What you say in Virginia we didn't have writing? You're like, we had writing contests.
I don't want to brag, but North Carolina is pretty highly ranked and we're in the top 50 in education.
Good for y'all.
We had a essay that we had to write. It was based on a prompt that you would get. So the prompt would be revealed and then you would write. And in order to prepare for this, we practiced every day. So 20 minutes of writing minimum, just drop everything.
How old are you right now?
Fourth grade.
Fourth grade, okay.
Yeah. So I'm 9, 10. as we're working on this, the teacher's coaching us on how to approach different kinds of prompts and how to think about things. She said 1 year, and this was several years before we were doing this, somebody wrote an essay and it ended with, and it was all a dream. And that was how they...
And that kid failed, and he's still stuck in first grade.
No, he won some contest.
Oh, wow.
But then the next year, everybody's essay ended with being in a dream. And so for our year, the rule was your story cannot end or involve a dream. We just can't do it anymore.
The dream trope is kind of, it's fun. I don't mind it in a story, but like anytime a TV show or something that ends with, oh, it was all in someone's head or something like that, that's not fun. No. That's not fun.
Yeah. There was a soap opera that I remember my parents talking about for years, because they did this whole season. They killed off all these characters.
Yeah.
And then they really got themselves into trouble. And so they decided that it was all a dream, and they wiped everything out at the end of the season, brought everybody back.
I don't remember if this is correct because I've never seen it, but isn't it the Bob Newhart show, spoiler alert, from 50 years ago?
Yes.
It ended with him just waking up, and the whole thing was just a dream, right?
This is what I was talking about at the beginning of the episode. I feel like somebody came up with this 10,000 years ago.
Yeah,
they're drawing it on the wall, and then it ends with a dream cloud.
It was a dream, and now we just use that. Let me ask you this. Let's get off topic just for a quick second. What is... You don't have to spoil it.
If you ask me if this is a simulation.
No. What is the worst... Because this is more of a TV thing than it is... Because I think like a serialized stories, that's where you get into these kind of... You write yourself into a hole. So you're like, oh, it was a dream, right? It doesn't happen as much in novels or in movies as much because you're writing the whole story as it goes, right? But it's in a more serialized, whether that is comics or whether it is, many Victorian novels that were written in a more serialized fashion, or probably for a lot of modern audiences, television, that you end up with like, oh, we've written ourselves into a hole. We got to figure something out. Do you have a least favorite ending to a serialized story? I'm thinking particularly television. They're just like, oh, it's just a terrible ending.
I don't know how many things I've finished. For example, I had never finished Community.
Okay. Really? It's only 6 seasons.
Yeah.
And a movie.
Maybe. We'll see. Every now and then I'll see something about how...
I know, every few years you're like, oh, they're still say they're doing it.
It's actually going to happen. Yeah, so I really don't... I think that I've heard about the endings of Mad Men, Sopranos, and I've heard about the ending of Lost, but I don't think I've actually ever finished
I would defend the ending of Lost till I die.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's the last season is the weakest season. I'll say yes.
Well, you've said for years that there's never been something that has a really good set of 6 seasons, right?
If I were to ever go back and get a PhD in television, I don't even know if this exists, and I wouldn't do this, but I would write my entire thesis about no show should be allowed to go past its 6th season. No show on TV has ever peaked past its 6th season.
Right.
There are shows that are still good, 7, 8, or 9 seasons in or whatever, but no one's ever like, oh my gosh, my favorite season is the 8th season of some show. It just doesn't happen.
I wish that more shows would not get canceled after season 1. For example, Firefly.
Okay.
But
halfway through season 1.
Some of them kind of, they are better because they got cut off early. Even with People, I think a lot of people have a positive...
If they get their lives get cut short? What do you...
No, they have a positive view of JFK.
Oh, okay.
But if you actually look into the details, it wasn't that positive. But he's generally well remembered. We named things after him, but it's because it got cut off a little bit early.
Oh, sure.
And I think that if a TV show gets cut off a little bit early, and then it's left up to your imagination, you never get that ending. Maybe that's a little better. Comics are the worst with this.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's relatively easy to produce in terms of you don't have to employ a bunch of people. You can have 4 people to make a comic relatively quickly. And then the stories can just keep going. And we're now seeing this happen with movies. To me, the Marvel movies were so great because it took these long, complicated things and distilled them down into, here's this key part. It ends in 2.5 hours. And that was the whole arc. But now it's built and built and built. And I loved it. And the first 30 movies were so fun. But now the TV shows are kind of stretching. They're mixing timelines. They have the same actor playing multiple roles in the same kind of universe, and it's getting complicated again, which was my frustration with comics at the beginning of getting into stuff. I couldn't figure out where to start. Issue 673 through 694. That's the best part. Like, how is this?
How do I get? Yeah.
And I would pick a random one up from a used comic place, and I had no idea what was going on. And then even if you get a book of stuff together, there's no true ending.
Stories are meant to end. Like they're supposed to have endings to it. And if we think that so much of stories are, we believe that they point to the one true story, right? There's an ending.
Yeah.
Right. There is legitimately an ending to that story. Right. Yeah. And so that means that like stories are not supposed to just perpetually wear on. And that's why people have soured on the Marvel movies. That's why I stopped reading the Amazing Spider-Man comic, because they're literally in the 700s. I read so many of them as a kid, and you're like, okay, this is great. But then the ones that were really good, like I like not Unlimited, what's it called? Ultimate Spider-Man, the Brian Michael Bendis run from, it's like 25 years old at this point with Mark Bagley. It is only 110 issues long. And so like there really is a beginning and an end to it. One of the reasons I really enjoy that run of comics so much is because it ended. Yeah. There was a very clear ending to it. And I think not having an ending really... It's good things should end.
Oh, I thought we were going to announce our retirement.
And that's why it's this episode. We're going to end very abruptly. No,
we're going to end at the top, so without finishing the book.
He's dreaming, but in one of these dreams, or at least what appears to be a dream, a woman with white hair, who I think we can just say is Irene's grandma, right? Can we just name it as Irene's grandmother, comes to him. She takes out some things from a box, and she kind of, we don't have to get all the details here, but she pretty much heals him. She heals Curdy's leg, his wound. And when he eventually wakes back up, he realizes where he is, and he actually is able to get out. I was a little unclear about this. Is the door unlocked for him?
I'm wondering if she just kind of...
She left it open when she left.
Adjusted the lock when she was going out.
Because it says, at the last wave of her hands, everything vanished. He felt himself sinking into the profoundest slumber and remembered nothing more until he awoke in earnest. So then he wakes again. The setting moon was throwing a feeble light through the casement, and the house was full of uproar. There was a soft, heavy, multitudinous stamping, a clashing and clanging of weapons, the voices of men and the cries of women mixed with the hideous bellowing which sounded victorious. The Cobbs were in the house. He sprang from his bed, hurried on some of his clothes, not forgetting his shoes, which were armed with nails, and then spying an old hunting knife or short sword hanging on the wall, he caught it and rushed down the stairs, guided by the sounds of strife, which grew louder and louder.
So I'm assuming this is in a different room than he was imprisoned in. They didn't leave him in a prison with a sword hanging on the wall.
Oh, probably not.
So I think this must be the room next door where the guards had been.
Did you think she just like moved him in the middle of the night or something?
No, I think that whatever was keeping him in, she removed that barrier.
And so he just finds it. He just leaves. It's like, oh, there's stuff right there.
On his way out of maybe the second room, because the guards are gone.
Correct.
They're busy. I almost said dizzy. They're busying with the with the goblins. They are busy dealing with all the chaos that's going on.
And Curdy, as he is prone to do, runs right into the action, courageously singing a song. 1, 2, hit and hew. 3, 4, blast and bore. He goes on to say, where 'tis a hole, sir, never can be holes. Why should their shoes have soles, sir, when they've got no soles?
Just absolutely brutal. He does not hold back.
But she upon her foot, sir, has a granite shoe. The strongest leather boot, sir, 6 would soon be through. That's great.
It's so mean, but it's okay because they're goblins.
Yeah, so he begins fighting all of them, and it gets a little violent here for our fairy tale. He's also, with his shoes, he's pretty much wearing cleats, like the track cleats that have like the metal studs in them, and he's just stamping on all these goblin feet.
So painful.
He eventually, though, as he's fighting, he realizes that they don't have the princess, but he continues on nonetheless, and he makes it into the room where the queen and her party had encountered the men at arms. We know that Hairlip is off with another company, presumably searching the house for the princess. As Curdy fights the queen, he's able to, as he's stamping on feet and everything and telling everyone else, stamp on their feet, he's actually able to get a slash across the queen's face.
Yikes.
She is...
That's going to set it up for later.
Oh, big time. All right, so Curdy takes the men-at-arms. They're fighting along, and he eventually actually even gets to the queen, and they engage in battle, and she's able to escape shortly. We then take a pause, and we follow Hairlip, who has gone off with another company and has begun drinking wine in the cellar.
Someone very wise starts serving them wine, and once they have a little bit of a taste, they want even more. They're completely distracted by it.
They're completely distracted by it. What it says here is that Hairlip was off with another company and gone to search the house. They captured everyone they met, and when they could find no more, they hurried away to carry them safe to the caverns below. But when the butler, who was amongst them, found that their way lay through the wine cellar, he bethought himself of persuading them to taste the wine, and, as he had hoped, they no sooner tasted than they wanted more. And so they this is ridiculous because Hairlip is there with goblins. They have prisoners with them. Like, let's pause and drink some of this wonderful wine that is here. And because they pause, Curdy's actually able to catch up with them. Curdy cast one glance around the place before commencing his attack and saw in the farthest corner a terrified group of the domestics unwatched, but cowering without courage to attempt their escape. Amongst them was the terror-stricken face of Ludi, but nowhere could he see the princess. Seized with the horrible conviction that Hairlip had already carried her off, he rushed amongst them, unable for wrath to sing any more, but stamping and cutting with greater fury than ever. They continue fighting, and that is when the queen shows back up. And the queen and the king are both there, and it is... Curdy, who's able to get a slash across the queen's face. That's where this happens, right? In this second battle that takes place.
Yeah, it's pretty descriptive of all the violent stuff that's happening. But I think this reinforces your point about how this is the climax of the story. This is the climactic battle.
Yes. Hairlip actually takes Ludi because he wants, just like his father did, wants to take a son woman to be his. And when Ludi screams, Curdy hears her and he sees her plight. And then gathering all of his strength, here's what MacDonald says, he gave the queen a sudden cut across the face with his weapon, came down as she started back with all his weight on the proper foot, and sprang to Ludi's rescue. The prince, which by the way, very important here, I thought that the prince, the first time I read this, I thought it actually meant Curdy. Because we've been told that he's a prince,
right.
But it's not. No, he still means Hairlip here.
This is Hairlip.
So who is not acting like a prince. The prince, meaning Hairlip, had two defenseless feet, and on both of them Curdy stamped just as he reached the hole. He dropped his burden and rolled shrieking into the earth. Curdy made one stab at him as he disappeared, caught hold of the senseless Ludi, and having dragged her back to the corner, there mounted guard over her, preparing once more to encounter the queen. Her face streaming with blood and her eyes flashing green lightning through it, she came on with her mouth open and her teeth grinning like a tiger's, followed by the king and her bodyguard of the thickest goblins. But they decide, as they see all the goblins, the men-at-arms, they actually decide not to engage them, and they let them escape, thinking we need to go take care of the people who are still here.
Right.
Particularly, we need to go back and make sure Irene is safe. But this is actually a mistake. Why so?
Well, before we get to that, I want to point out that this should really improve the relationship with Ludi.
Hopefully so, right?
Because he really helped her out.
Yeah, he just saved you from being taken, prisoner, and to be wedded to one of the goblins potentially.
Right. They really cannot find the princess.
No, they go back up there.
They see evidence that there may have been a struggle and she may have been kidnapped.
Yes. And now they're kind of kicking themselves for why did we not stop the goblins? We let them escape.
Yeah, he said a pang of despair. He saw how wrong they had been in not securing the king and queen and prince.
Yeah. And so we're left with the cliffhanger of Irene has now been taken captive. And that's where we end.
Yes. It ends with the words, meet the worst fate to which the goblins could doom him.
Yeah. And that's what we'll end for today. Man, these were 3 really fun chapters.
Yeah.
So much action. I'm so excited to get into. We only have 5 chapters left in the book, 2 more episodes. We got more stuff planned for this season, but only 2 more episodes of chapter walkthroughs here.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy. Yeah, in the next few chapters, we'll see if we're able to save the princess. Although I think knowing that it's a fairy tale, the ending won't be all that surprising. In fact, here's what we have. Curdy's Guide, chapter 28, Mason Work, chapter 29, and chapter 30, The King and the Kiss.
Oh,
So 3 exciting chapters.
depending on who's involved, that could be
All kinds of things could be happening.
it's not clear who's who.
Phil, in lieu of listener feedback today, you've actually given me something you want to share on the show,
Yes.
which is not an email.
So for context, I bought Daniel a Christmas gift and then went over a few days before Christmas and saw that he had already bought himself the same book and was really enjoying it. So
It was The Letters of Father Christmas by J.R.R. Tolkien.
by Tolkien. So Tolkien wrote all these really fancy letters to his kids as Santa, and they're hilarious. They're illustrated. It's so fun. And I thought this will be the perfect thing. Daniel and I get each other books for Christmas almost every year, and we almost always take at least 2 or 3 years before we actually open them up and read
That's fair
them.
enough, yeah.
And I feel like we both really nailed it this time because we got each other books that we already had.
Yeah, what did I get you? I already forgot.
It was another George
Oh,
McDonald
the George
book.
McDonald book you already had. That's
The
right.
comic one.
Yeah, I was like the first time you ever gave me a book, it was Deep Work by Cal Newport. This is literally like 6 or 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago or so.
Yeah.
And I didn't touch it for 5 years. Then I was like, this Cal Newport guy's really great. And you're like, yeah, that's why I bought you the book. Like,
Well, you started sending me pieces from it. I was like, that's on your shelf.
oh, that's right. It was before I actually read the book. I was reading excerpts from it. And you're like, yeah, you already own that book.
It's on
I
your
bought it
shelf.
for you.
Go read
I
the whole
forgot
thing.
that it was.
Yep.
So you got me. What did you get me instead?
So instead, I was at a comic book shop in Boston, paid for with our Patreon money because we were going to go to a conference, ended up not going. We had some credit. So I went to Boston to see some coworkers and some friends. And I found this Star Wars comic book that just came out at the end of 2004. And I really
2004. It just came out
2024.
20 years ago.
Yeah, it just came out in 2024. Really enjoyed the illustration style, but I also got you something else. It is
This is what you really wanted to talk about, not the Star Wars comic book.
This is the thing I want to talk about. It's a stapleless stapler. No metal pieces getting left in your paper. This somehow binds the 2 pieces of paper together just by punching and folding
And
the
that tells
paper.
people how cool it is to be in your mid-30s.
Yes.
You're like, I got you a stapler, but not a stapler
But not
for
a stapler.
Christmas. Where'd you get it from? Because and this is not, I mean, this is a bad thing, but there's not a word of English on this this package.
You're right. And that's why I think this would be such a funny thing to be sponsored by.
Did you
If we
order
could be
it, or did you pick it up at the same store?
I read about it online. I almost ordered it online, decided to wait, and then I ended up seeing it at the Harvard bookstore. And
Oh, you had to-
just so
okay.
people know, I've been to Harvard.
Yeah,
I went to Harvard for an afternoon, and I went to the bookstore, and this is one of the things that they had there.
All right, so straight from Harvard University.
That's right. And I carried it around in my pocket the rest of the day.
That's super uncomfortable. This is not this packaging would not be comfortable to put in your pocket.
No.
You could fit it in there,
This
but it's
is in
going
a
to be
jacket
bulky.
pocket, but still,
Oh, okay, that's better.
I had this bulge. It looked like I was packing heat.
All right, well there
You
you
know,
go.
like hand warmers, not.
Oh, I know. No, I knew what you meant.
And this
there.
is up north, you know.
You can't do that up there.
Can't do that.
Not like down here in the south. Well, Phil, thank you so much for this. This is great. We'll start stapling all our podcasts.
That's right. If you want to print out of the transcript of this show and you want all the pieces to stay together. No, I think we actually, for season 8, we had a lot of staples.
We did
that
have a
used.
lot of staples there, and
Yeah.
you were really bothered by
You
that.
were,
so
you
here
were
we
really
are.
playing with the Xerox machine a lot.
Yeah. Well, Phil, I think it's time for us to wrap up, and I'll do our end credits today.
Let's hear it.
This episode is made possible by our patrons over at patreon.com. If you'd like to support the show, you can listen to a bonus episode each month along with other rewards. We're also spending a little bit more time talking about Narnia and the new not potential movie. There is being a movie made, but potentially The Magician's Nephew. Also, I heard some new covers are coming out for the books, which we'll talk about maybe in the next month or two over there on the podcast, over there, The Dancing Lawn. That'll be great. Special thanks, as always, goes to John Marr, Emily Wakefield, Ryan Smith, Ander Trophy, Becca Brown, Christy Annaline, and Ian Wooten for supporting us at our top tiers. You can email us at hello@lamppostlistener.com or leave us a voicemail at 406-646-6733. And you can visit lamppostlistener.com to find all the information about previous episode links and book information. As always, we appreciate a review wherever you listen to this podcast, as it helps other listeners find the show and join together on our read-through. Thank you for coming along on this journey, and we'll be back soon.